I'm Patrick Diamond. I'm an academic at Queen Mary University of London, where I teach British politics and also public policy. I'm also involved in a think tank called Policy Network, which is an international think tank which has connections with policy thinkers and politicians, particularly in continental Europe. And prior to that, I worked for a decade in British government, largely as a special advisor, but also as a civil servant employed in a non-departmental public body, where I was involved in public policy issues, particularly around delivery of public services. Special advisors are obviously politically appointed, so they're different to civil servants because they are appointed by a specific minister, and the appointment is personal to that minister. And whereas the civil service in Britain traditionally has been non-political and non-partisan, a special advisor is able to deal with political issues that may be of concern to a minister in the way that a civil servant can't. That's a rather abstract answer. In practice, that means things like being able to write political speeches, being able to write political articles, dealing with parliamentarians of the minister's party who might have questions or issues about party political handling matters, being able to liaise with the party, those sorts of things, essentially giving the minister support on political matters that the civil service couldn't. I think working in public policy, working in government, working in public agencies is a very exhilarating experience. It is an experience where you are constantly being challenged because the breadth and scale of the issues that you're dealing with in any given week, in any given day, can be immense. So it is in many ways intoxicating, but also in some respects an exhausting experience for anyone who's been in government at a reasonably high level. Obviously in academia we have the luxury of being able to reflect much more on a lot of the issues that governments are dealing with. But in my work as an academic, I've tried to still, in a sense, get involved in debates and also discussions about how policies actually get delivered, some of the problems around the policy process. So I think it's important for academics not just to, as it were, sit back and analyse the world from a position of, the luxurious position of being able to look on these events, but also to get involved themselves in thinking about how to make policy better. One of the issues I've been working on a lot recently, I suppose, is the whole field of public policy implementation, which I've become more and more interested in. I think in the part of the policy world that I was particularly involved in, think tanks, high levels of government and so on, a lot of the focus is on coming up with really exciting policy ideas, but there is less focus on how to turn those ideas into workable propositions that actually make a difference in the real world. And I think the neglect of delivery and implementation, particularly at the top of government, has been a really big problem historically. And therefore we need to think much more about how we can reconnect the policy formulation process with the policy implementation process, so as to make sure that the policies that we produce are both coherent, but also, as I say, capable of really translating through into delivery. I would say yes, because I think both politics and policy analysis can give you, firstly, an unrivaled insight into how society works, in terms of understanding how different outcomes get produced, how inequalities arise between different groups in society. The origins of social divisions can often best be understood from the perspective of politics and policy analysis. There are many professional opportunities available in both the world of politics and also in policy making and policy analysis, which are very interesting and important. I think for students, very often they tend to think in terms of careers in traditional policy-making institutions, think tanks, the civil service and so on. I think those careers still exist and are very important and valuable, but there are also new kinds of careers in policy-making developing. Local government, I think, is a really exciting area, despite the fact that there have been big cuts in local government budgets. I think local government is at the forefront of some of the most interesting work around redesigning public services. Equally, I think NGOs, civil society organisations, are probably more engaged in policy making and service delivery than any time in modern British history, and therefore there are both interesting issues but also potentially really interesting and exciting career opportunities in those areas, and I would really encourage students to pursue those.